Greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is still doing well, and welcome to today's bonus upload. And it is full of terrifying Dogman experiences, I can tell you that much. Before we jump into it, a couple links. As you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, channel membership, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon, PayPal, channel membership is in the description below. Merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support this channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It doesn't cost you a cent. Click that like button, takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads I put out daily, click that bell icon, and folks, please leave a comment. Why? Well, because all these things really do help this channel to continue to grow and go, and yes, folks, they do matter. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump in to today's bonus, shall we? Today's first part of the upload. Back in the early 60s, when I was about 10 years old, my dad and uncle pooled their resources and bought a brand new vacation home in Palm Springs, California. Our house was second from the corner, right across the street from a newly built golf course that had super tall trees lining the course, seemingly more than a mile long and not too far from the city of Bermuda Dunes. Our vacation home had 3 bedrooms, a living room, a dining room, TV area, and a small kitchen, with a pass-through bar on one long side facing the TV area. The home also had a large rectangular pool in an oversized backyard. The kitchen had a door to the pool and backyard at one end, and the entrance from the dining room area at the other end. To the left and right of that kitchen entrance from the dining room area and perpendicular to it were 2 6-foot-wide floor-to-ceiling walls that were painted bright white to the immediate left and right of that dining area entrance. There were no decorations on either of those blank walls. This description is important, as you will see. To help with sleeping accommodations, when we had extra guests, we had 2 couches that folded out into double beds. One couch was in the TV area facing the kitchen pass-through, and the other was directly across the kitchen entrance, facing those 2 white walls, just to one side of the dining room and perpendicular to the other couch. Now, whenever we had friends visiting with us, their kids and I was most often assigned to sleep on the fold-out couch directly across from the kitchen entrance. Directly above this couch was a long, narrow window that was positioned about 7 feet high, nestled right under a roofline. This non-opening window was about 5 feet wide, and was only about 1 foot tall, making the top of this window about 8 feet high. At night, the 2 walls looked very much like a movie theater screen whenever any headlights or moonlight came through that high-placed window. This window faced the same direction as our double front door entrance, north. We were one of only a few homes on the far east end of this particular block, which was quite isolated from any other homes in this new tract. It was originally planned for more than 100 homes. At this point in time, there were no more than a dozen homes in this entire tract, including our own. The golf course was just 1 block east of us and was often vacant during the very hot summer months that we always vacationed in, but always far too hot to play golf. This course had huge, flat, tree-lined fairways. Since there was so much space all around us as kids, we had an absolute blast hunting lizards and field mice during the hot summer days, along with any errant soda cans with our lever-cocked Daisy BB guns. We weren't very good shots, so we rarely connected with much more than pucker bushes and old rusted cans, which were made out of steel back then. Sometimes we vacationed only with family, 6 cousins plus uncles and aunts. Other times, just one family or the other would plan a getaway with various other groups of friends. This vacation was one of the latter. Regardless, we always had a fantastic time as kids vacationing back then. All these homes were designed with 1-inch granite rock poured about 3 to 4 inches deep around the entire front yard as a replacement for grass. At that time, we had no other plants, just loose rock for a front yard, and a 5-foot cinder block wall all around the sides of the backyard. The loose rock made walking across it from the street parking difficult and very noisy at best. The front entrance had a 6.5-foot U-shaped cinder block wall that functioned as a windbreak for similar height double entry, solid wood doors with no windows. I remember the double doors had 2 large brass surrounds in front of the doorknobs and a magnified peephole for visitor identification on the operating door. On this particular vacation weekend, my mom brought my 6-year-old brother and my 10-year-old self, along with my mom's friend Jeannie, and her 2 boys, Chris, 9, and Greg, 11. During this particular vacation, I remember very clearly that each night we had a full moon and crystal clear weather with very little wind. There was most always some wind. One night after a particularly hard day at play, Chris, Greg, and I slept on that under-window couch, with me right in the middle. My brother was much younger, so he slept in the master bedroom with my mom and her friend. At about 2 or 3 in the morning, I was abruptly awakened by the sound of slow, plodding, heavy, rock-crunching footsteps from the front yard. They started from way out at the curb and became progressively louder as they got closer to our concrete walkway front entrance. The crunching stopped when it reached the section leading to the front door. Within a short period of time after crunching stopped, the doorknob was twisted slowly one way, and then another multiple times, and always slowly, never fast apparently, trying to remain as silent as possible. Luckily, my mom had made sure the front door was locked and bolted before we all hit the sack. We were very isolated out in that lonely part of the desert back then, and I was literally on the verge of pissing my jammies thinking of what might happen if it got in. After the knob twisting stopped, there was another short pause, until I heard the same heavy, rock-crunching footsteps getting closer and closer, to a point directly outside our house where the couch we 3 were sleeping on, and was directly opposite those 2 white walls. As it got near that high window, the full moon began casting its clearly focused shadow directly onto those walls right in front of me. With every rock-crunching step, it moved left to right directly in front of that window, bobbing and twisting its head, obviously trying to get a good look around inside. After a surprisingly amount of time, about 4 or 5 minutes, whatever it was eventually gave up and left. But not without a lot of continuous rock-crunching steps until it was completely out of audible range. Needless to say, as it was trying to see in, I curled my knees tightly up into my chest so nothing of me was visible in all of that bright moonlight, which was lighting up the entire end of our fold-out couch, along my clearly lit legs. Chris and Greg were far enough to either side of the couch, almost falling off, which prevented either one of them from being seen in that bright moonlight shining through the window. Needless to say, I was 10 that was thoroughly freaked out. The next morning, after we 3 were wide awake, I explained to Chris and Greg exactly what happened that evening, pointing directly at the white walls in front of us. They were both totally creeped out but very interested and extremely eager to investigate. We went out to look before anyone else was up. We didn't want anyone or anything to change the evidence that might be out there. The rocks prevented any real accurate impressions, but you could clearly see there were very large, deep, square-shaped footsteps in the rocks as it entered and exited our front yard, as well as a large area of tamped rocks directly under that high window where it spent most of its time. Trying to view into our home's interior, there was a fairly straight path of huge, deep rock prints coming from the street closest to the golf course, coming toward the front entrance, and then a diagonal path from the high window towards our driveway as it left. By the end of the day, our footprints and everyone else's had messed up most of the evidence. The image that was cast on that wall was obviously very tall. The sound it made as it walked was extremely heavy, and at a slow but very steady pace, as if it was afraid of absolutely nothing, but was trying to be silent and undiscovered as possible. What was most interesting is the image in silhouette had a partially rounded top to its wide head, with absolutely no neck as it turned slightly while slowly bobbing up and down to get a view. The sharply pointed ears were absolutely straight up, which became a little closer together whenever it turned to either side, along with the length of what must have been a muzzle became longer in profile. At the time, my 10-year-old self thought it was a spaceman's helmet with some strange pointed antennas or possibly Batman. But today I know much better, much better. This was a Dogman before I even knew what one was, let alone draw a near perfect representation of one exactly as I saw it portrayed, directly across from us on those white walls. That memory of what I saw in that changing profile was burnt quite clearly into my mind ever since. Today's second encounter. In May of 2019, my husband and I were visiting the North Carolina mountains to celebrate his birthday. We had just planned to drive to go sightseeing for a couple of days, but then decided to take a walk down the Pigeon Creek Trail at Mingo Falls. A friend had told us about the waterfalls. We got there early, around 8:45, and there were no cars or people, and we parked and started to walk up the long steps. When we arrived at the waterfall, we immediately saw a monster. It was a wild man, and he was naked and had a bushy body hair. His face was deformed and lumpy, skinny but tall, and we could see his chest. His ribs were sticking out. The bottom half of the naked body was more hairy than the top. The arms looked longer than they should have been. Odd-shaped head. My husband described him as being mangled and deformed. I said, "James, what is up there?" And as soon as I said that, we both started smelling something awful like garbage and vomit. We stared at him for a second, and we saw the man's eyes were white and cloudy like he had cataracts. He seemed evil and startled that we saw him. He was just standing there. The thing was carrying an old blanket in its hand, and it dragged it into the water like a little child's blanket because we saw colors in the blanket, but the blanket was wet and dirty. We watched him for a second, and he crouched down at the top of the waterfall and disappeared into it, as if it dropped down into some bunker. We turned around and went back to our car and continued to look around us. We were scared. We know it was not a Bigfoot, and we know it was a man because we saw the man's uncircumcised penis. The legs were wet, too, because all his hair was wet. It was about 6.5 feet tall, hairy, but we could still see the skin under the hair, saw his chest and ribs. It was just like a hairy, deformed and mangled man, cloudy white eyes, big hands. He had full, dark facial hair, but looked a little bald on top of his head with long strands of hair as well. We were going to check out the casino in Cherokee, North Carolina later that day, but we decided to go home after that. We believe it was a wild man monster. Today's third encounter is a subscriber's submission. Hey Jeff, I had a Dogman encounter back in 1991 in October in Oglethorpe County, Georgia. It was the night the Braves won the first National League pennant in years. I listened to the game that night, then fell asleep. Something woke me up, and when I shined my spotlight above me, a black wolf was 3 or 4 feet from my head. When I camp, my guns are with me. I had a .357 Magnum already in my hand, and when the light hit this thing, it had put a hand up, not a paw, but a hand with 2 or 3 inch claws. It looked thin and bony like a raccoon's hand. I automatically throwed my gun and started shooting. I know I hit it in its mouth 'cause blood poured out, and it knocked it down. It jumped back up and I kept firing until my gun was empty. I had my .44 mag rifle as well and fired 7 shots. It knocked it into the high grass where I don't know if it died or not. I loaded my pistol and rifle back up, then started throwing a few things into my car. Now this is important. I pour a 5-gallon water jug on my fire and 2 extra gallons I had. My fire was out. I got home in the morning and got a call from a guy I leased from. A forest fire burned 8 or more acres, and when I got there, 2 guys were there and a helicopter with a net under it was flying away. A big guy who was huge and muscled up came over and said that the fire started burning 2 feet from my fire, but they all saw where I had put sand and poured water on mine. It was out when I left. The big guy then asked me what I had shot. I asked him why, and he said look at all the casings lying around. I told him I didn't know what it was, but I guessed that it was a huge black coyote, and I thought more was in the brush, which I did see other eyes, yellow. These was but the one that came after me had purple, reddish eyes. The big guy said to me, stick to that story and we'd be fine. A week later I had an encounter with a big fox, and when I shot it, it was gone. No hair, blood, or anything. I had my wife's cousin with me, and we looked everywhere for that fox. No fox. I've had other encounters that blew my mind, Bigfoot and other stuff. I just put a little bit of my encounter with the Dogman. There is more, a lot more. If you want to hear it, email me back, and we can talk. Thanks, Jeff. Alright, I did email this guy back, and I am hoping that he responds soon because I invited him to come on the show and share what he has to share with us. I'm looking forward to it. Today's 4th encounter. This happened a couple weeks back. So 2 of my buddies who are police officers were out searching for a missing person in the woods. It was dark out and they were searching near a small lake. They're separated by about 50 yards or so, both with canine. They start hearing this splashing noise in the middle of the lake, so they head down to the water's edge. They keep hearing the splashing and thought it may be the person they were searching for out for a swim, even though it's 50 degrees out. They start calling to the guy they assume it is to start coming towards them. They start shining their flashlights toward the sound. They can see something moving, but can't make out what it is. Whatever this thing is, it starts moving towards them very quickly, like 20 miles an hour or so. As it gets closer, they see that it's a very pale face of a person, but it can't be for how fast it was moving. When it got 50 feet from them, it dove under the water, making a huge splash with an oddly shaped appendage. They both said that it was a human face, even though they saw it from different angles, being there was some space in between them. Really quick, I know that people have criticized me for sharing other encounters other than Dogman on the channel, but I wanted to share that one because it is creepy as hell. And just because the name is Dogman Encounters with Jeffrey Nadolny does not mean it's just Dogman. There's a reason why my channel is named that, and maybe someday I will share why. Until then, I'll leave you guys guessing why. Today's 5th encounter. I was sitting in my garden reading out on my patio step, and I started hearing this weird noise. At first I thought it was some strange bird, as it was a low clicking type sound with this odd growling. I noticed it and thought, weird birds, kept reading. Then it progressively got louder and I started listening to it. as if it wasn't a fox call or a fight. I know most of the local wildlife, and nothing makes a weird sound like that. It's getting louder and louder sounding, like a really deep, almost guttural, glibbering and clicking sound. Obviously, I'm freaking weirded out and thought it was creepy. I put out my cig and then heard what sounded like someone screaming really, really deep and wrong. It was just unnatural, almost like a scream of a man playing on a really bad quality speaker, with all this weird clicking and gibbing over the top of it. I was terrified and trying to figure out what this legitimately was. Someone dying at the bottom of our cul-de-sac? The screaming sounded so real, I felt frozen, and my instinct was to immediately go help, but it sounded too repetitive, like someone was playing it on a loop. It sounded like two people were making the noise, like a person was making the same scream over and over, and someone else was making the clicking and growling and the weird noise. It didn't sound like anything natural at all. So I sat there, frozen, trying to read and write out a message to my friend, and just waiting for it to quiet down so I could come out of the dark and creep inside. As it sounded closer, the closer I didn't want to draw attention to myself. It got worse before it got better, and then I did the best silent fast walk inside, locked all the doors and windows, and proceeded to freak the hell out. I've heard creepy shit and seen creepy shit before, but this was next level. I went to my grandma's room and told her. She gave me a hug and basically shrugged it off. There was just something so not natural about that. I don't know what to do. Also, I'm a firm believer in things that cannot be explained, but as I have never had an experience like this, I have never felt fully aware of it. There's been a few times in my life where I've experienced complete reality insanity, but my God, this thing was really rammed to the point home. Something not normal is near my home, and I don't know what it is. I am a 22-year-old female, and I live in the far north of England, Northumberland. It's a very rural area. I live on a small cul-de-sac on the furthest edge of the village. Also, I'd like to add, it may not have any significance, but recently, me and my grandma hit and killed a small deer. It was very young, but not sure if it was a full-on baby. It was in the bush when I saw it. It turned on its axis and ran in front of the car. Gram braked and tried to swerve, but it got hit. It died on impact. I saw its neck snap back like an accordion, but respect was paid to it. We both are still devastated about what happened. Grandma wouldn't let me out of the car to help move its body, saying she didn't want me to be traumatized. She didn't realize I had already seen it die. She moved its body and told it she was sorry for hitting it. She didn't mean it. We would have buried it, but we didn't want its parents to panic, thinking it was missing, so its body was left. We didn't get hurt physically, as my grandma drives a 4x4, so not much damage was done. She checked at the time, and there was only slight damage to the car, but today she told me she looked again, and the front was very damaged. It looked like huge pieces of the grille had been impacted and broken inwards, and there was cracks on the paintwork. I know that's not important, but I wanted to say in case it may have something to do with it. Also, 3 days after we hit the deer, someone my grandma was close to, her deceased partner's brother, died of liver failure. I'm just weirded out by these noises, and I may be drawing too much for this. Alright folks, I hope you all enjoyed this bonus upload. Just a quick one to get us through the day into later tonight for tonight's second half. Guys, I truly do appreciate all of your support and kindness. Interesting email I got today. Bill Cooper, the author of Behold the Pale Horse, he had a kind of news print that he used to do. And one of the cartoonists that used to cartoon for that newspaper reached out to me today and said, thank you for keeping William Cooper's name alive. And I was shocked. and he's got a couple experiences, not with Dogman, but with other cryptids. Plus, he's got a heck of a lot of information. So I'm going to reach out to him here in the next couple of days or two. Just found it amazing, you know. Never thought possible that I'd be able to speak to someone that knew Bill Cooper personally on that level. I mean, I've done interviews with Laura Eisenhower and such, but Bill Cooper is a whole different kind of entity in my eyes. Just amazing. Anyway, guys, please stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant, keeping an eye on our children, our pets, our family, and friends. These creatures are real, they are out there, and they are dangerous. Share this information with the people you love and care about, and it may just help save their lives someday. Until next time, never stop asking questions, never stop searching for answers, and God bless you all.